Senator Liu, Councilman Rosendahl, good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Bill Piazza. I'm an Environmental Assessment Coordinator with the Los Angeles Unified School District. As a member of the Santa Monica Airport Working Group, I had the pleasure to prepare a comprehensive assessment of air quality conditions associated with airport operations at Santa Monica Airport. My testimony is short, and it's sweet, at least I think it's sweet, and invite those interested to read the full text of my report, which is available online. The Santa Monica Municipal Airport Health Risk Assessment was designed to quantify community exposures from both criteria and toxic air contaminants associated with aircraft and ground support operations. The assessment utilized a refined approach to assess the downwind extent of contaminant emissions throughout the local community. Relevant technical methodologies and regulatory guidance from the United States Environmental Protection Agency, the Federal Aviation Administration were incorporated into the analysis to ensure that the assessment was viable. To predict the downwind extent of contaminant concentrations, the U.S. EPA's Industrial Source Complex short-term model was used extensively to perform the dispersion analysis. When presented in 1999, the report offered the most comprehensive assessment relating to the generation of pollutants from an airport landing facility. Results of the assessment revealed that cancer risks for the maximum exposed individuals who live in proximity of the airport were 26 in 1 million. This value represents a discrete cancer risk associated with airport-related exposures. No background or ambient concentrations were incorporated into the risk quantification. Notwithstanding, emissions associated with airport operations were found to exceed the Act's clean air goal of 1 in a million. For particulates, the analysis revealed that both short-term and annual PM10 concentrations would not contribute to a violation of the National Ambient Air Quality Standard. For lead, contaminant concentrations were also found to be de minimis and not anticipated to meet or exceed the National Air Quality Standards. However, this is not to say that impacts don't exist. The data was limited. There is so much paucity in the data, and the data was limited to a few sources that I could incorporate to fully characterize their true extent. Although there are uncertainties associated with discrete variants or assumptions, such as aircraft exhaust emission factors, used to perform this assessment, it is believed that attention to regulatory guidance and the use of relevant tools, that is, conceptual and mathematical models, utilized to prepare the assessment provide a best estimate of community-based exposures. And you'll see this with a discrepancy possibly with a modeling approach versus a monitoring approach, and hopefully that will be teased out a little bit, or questions will come at what is a better approach. I mean, they are both and all tools to assess exposure. And if I may opine a little bit, although federal and state laws regulate the generation and subsequent risk associated with toxic air emissions from select stationary source operations, airports as a discrete source category are not expressly evaluated as a generator of toxic air emissions. Notwithstanding, airports are among the largest single source emitters of pollutants due to an array of emission sources associated with their operation: aircraft, motor vehicles, ground support equipment, and stationary plant operations. However, existing regulations at the federal and state level only offer control for limited stationary source categories, such as gasoline dispensing facilities, should these operations relate only to airport operations. With that said, it is my belief that the regulatory community should promulgate appropriate regulations that require airport landing facilities to disclose on-field emissions in a manner consistent with existing community right-to-know laws, as well as notifying communities of the risks associated with exposures to carcinogenic and non-carcinogenic compounds, as is done under programs such as California's AB 2588, the Air Toxic Hotspots Information and Assessment Act, for all emission sources, including aircraft. We have regulations for transportation facilities and ports such as Los Angeles and Long Beach. It is time that they encompass airports as well. I thank you for your time and consideration.
I just want to thank you, Bill. You've been sort of a pioneer and trailblazer in doing studies, and I think you did the first study that did rise to the level of awareness to all of us, and we're very grateful for that.
I did. Thank you.
Where do you think we should go at this point heading forward? We're having a state Senate hearing. We're having a substantive discussion. What's your vision of what can be done or should be done?
I believe there will always be debate relative to the results that come out of any study. And it will be interpreted if you're for the airport in one way, if you're against the airport in another way. We've seen that for how many years now? I think full disclosure is really what's needed. And as I mentioned, I think that, and I know this is difficult, but there is a community right to know issue. And I think that emissions associated with these types of source categories need to be made available. The laws exist. They've been around for an awfully long time. And I think if we can't control the emissions in flight, we can certainly control the emissions on ground. The study that I did clearly shows that the preponderance of the emissions and the impact associated with carcinogenic exposures comes from the taxi and idle phase of the aircraft's operations. Those are on ground. Those can be measured. The time it takes for aircraft to taxi and idle clearly can be determined, and the emissions associated with that aircraft certainly can be made available. The other problem is that we don't really have good data from the FAA on the actual exhaust emissions. We don't know exactly what the full speciation of compounds really are. And that would be helpful to have, and also I think if we have a full disclosure requirement such as community right to know, that may be teased out and we'll get some better data as well. But I also think that there's, aside from community right to know and information regarding this is the soup of stuff and crap that is being emitted from this particular source category, we could also, require those entities to prepare health risks assessment. I mean, you've got, again, AB 2588, the South Coast Air Quality Management District in their toxic rules require health risk assessments for smokestack industries and other sources. How come the airports don't have that same requirement or responsibility?
Thank you very much for that, Doctor. I call you doctor. Everybody's a doctor here, but you're
Call me. You know what? Call me anything you like. It's okay.
Thank you, Bill.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much.